Hello and welcome to the Safeguarding for Governors training delivered through bluesky. This is a completely new course that we are running this year. We are running a mixture of online and in-person training for this as well. This comes off the back of guidance from the government that says that governors should receive training that's different to those people that are working sort of child-facing and day-to-day in school. This is obviously because of the nature of their jobs being different and also the accountability measures being different within there as well. With this being an online offer, what you'll see a number of times with this slide or something similar appears as well. If we were in person, this would be where there'd be a moment for self-reflection or there'd be a group discussion part. Because of the nature of online sessions, what we're going to say is that if you want to pause at that point, you decide the length of that pause. If you're working individually, that's just for you to decide. If you're working as a group, decide that amongst yourselves. Historically, when we've done this as online training, sometimes that gap is too short, people say, or too long. But if people know that from the start, hopefully it just makes the whole process a lot smoother. So our first sort of reflection point, and sometimes it's important to take reflection points right at the start, just to frame the context of all of our training. So the statement is, safeguarding is the umbrella over all the work we do. And the reflection questions sort of like you to consider are, what does this actually mean? And where does this place safeguarding in schools? Where does this place safeguarding for us as individuals and as a governing body? And where does this place safeguarding for everybody, all of the stakeholders of the school? And then once we've considered that framing, the fundamental thing is, do we agree with that? Okay, so the aim of today's sessions is threefold. The first is to provide a sort of an overview of safeguarding. Hopefully these are recaps on things that you will have come across before, and we've got more detailed training offers if this is something that you would like. It gives particularly a common thread is around acronyms and just making sure we're okay with those. But there's also some local authority statistics and sort of key places and whatnot to identify within there. And then we'll move on to some of the key updates around keeping children safe in education. Obviously, this is an essential document for you as governors from there, and your accountability and how you can fill your role. And that will naturally lead us into your role as governor. And within that, there's some quite practicable sort of takeaways with you that will hopefully enable you to fulfill your role from a safeguarding point of view even better. Okay, so there will be lots of different parts that we cover within this, and you will have received some of the training. For those of you who have had this before, I make no apologies for repeating it. The more often we hear the message, the greater our understanding, the better. For those of you who this is new to, it does sometimes take a while to get our head around. The beauty of online training is obviously you can replay and whatnot as you need to from that. Okay, so we do mention keeping children safe in education here. I'm going to move that to in a lot more detail later on, but at this stage, it's just important you are aware of it. So governors should receive appropriate regular safeguarding and child protection training, which is the whole purpose of this. You will need to be aware of the Human Rights Act and the Equality Act, so they very much overlap into our child protection and safeguarding sort of areas of work as well. And you also need to have an understanding of local multi-agency and safeguarding arrangements, particularly within Coventry, those MASH arrangements, and you need to be familiar with keeping children safe in education as a document. Legislation and law, and I will share this PowerPoint as well so you can see the links there so you can access those documents directly. It's the duty of the governing body to ensure schools fulfil statutory responsibilities. Section 175 and 157 of the Education Act relate directly to this. And all functions are carried out with a view to safeguarding and promoting welfare. So it's safeguarding overarches everything. It's back to that reflection point at the start. It's the main reason why schools are in operation is to keep children safe. It's why safeguarding can be a trigger for Ofsted and things like that, and it is an immediate drop in if there is any concerns in relation to safety. So keeping children safe in education, it's a key guidance area, and it literally aims to do exactly what the title suggests. Includes taking into account additional guidance from the Secretary of State, local authority, and any local interagency agreements or procedures, and obviously was updated this year. The whole document applies to governors, and I think that's, when you look at the size of the document, that's a big expectation. That second point around keeping up to date with other things, it's a little bit of a catch-all, so if there are local developments, you need to be made aware of those. Hopefully, within each governor's meeting, there will be an opportunity for any updates on those particular areas So each school must have a DSL in charge of safeguarding who leads on safeguarding. That's a designated safeguarding lead, and then deputies support them, but also with the idea if for some reason they were to be taken away from school or to fall ill or something like that, the safeguarding measures can still sort of continue. And there should be a link governor for safeguarding, and that includes responsibilities to prevent as well. And you can see there the snapshot taken directly from Keeping Children Safe in Education. The DSL element should be explicit in the job descriptions. This is why it's normally, it's not always, doesn't have to be, but it's normally the head teacher or the principal who is the DSL, and it's normally part of their written contract as well, so they are obliged to fulfil those obligations. So safeguarding and promoting the welfare of children means protecting children from maltreatment, preventing impairment of children's mental or physical health or development, ensuring that children grow up in circumstances consistent with the provision of safe and effective care, taking action to enable all children to have the very best outcomes possible. And then we move on to child protection. You quite often hear these two words used quite a lot, and almost in unison, but they cover different areas within that. So child protection is intervening when a child is suffering or is at risk of suffering abuse or neglect. And a key part within this is that it includes referrals to multi-agency safeguarding hub. Again, what you'll quite often hear that referred to as MASH. There are types of abuse, and there is an introduction now of child on child. It used to be peer on peer, but they've made it specific now in Keeping Children Safe in Education to refer to child on child. That's page 10 if you do want to read that in a little bit more detail from there. So there's physical, emotional, sexual, and neglect. Those are the 4 types of abuse that we will refer to. It's interesting as well to note, and sort of important to note, that within Coventry, domestic abuse referrals are on the rise. It's the most reported form of abuse in terms of how it's recorded by the police as well from there last year. Within Coventry, obviously there will be wider focus areas that we consider, but within Coventry we know that sort of gang music is very prevalent. Gangs and sort of lots of the knock-ons with that, particularly county lines and violence associated with it, are a key area within Coventry. One of the big sort of recent developments that people need to be more aware of is the idea of drill music being used to concern. So this is particularly on YouTube, TikTok, other platforms where gangs are putting up it's almost like a song or chant type thing, but within it it's encouraging others to come and join or to come and act in certain ways. But it's the key thing to note is that the language they're using within that is almost like a sort of a code or a language that they can then refer to. One of the common ones that's come out within Coventry is a constant reference to the Premier League. This isn't Manchester United, Liverpool, Arsenal. This is within local gangs who has hurt the greatest number of people and things like that. So it's just one that needs to be aware of, that gangs are tapping into mainstream culture and mainstream social media, but also mainstream interest to be able to sort of subvert away from potential sort of them being picked up on things. So the other areas we talk a lot about will be cyberbullying, and again with the growth of social media, this is massively on the rise and of even greater concern. Similarly with online safety, mental health, and there's lots of really good work within Coventry that's going around supporting mental health. Prevent, again there'll be separate training from Prevent as well. FGM, so female genital mutilation, CSE and CCE, and we'll pick up those a little bit later on as well. And as we said before, gang violence being very prevalent within Coventry. Again within Coventry, so these are these statistics for the children falling under different categories within Coventry as well. As you mentioned earlier, the highest abuse area within Coventry is domestic abuse. We'll go through what these acronyms mean in a second as well. But you can just see there is such a huge number of children within the local authority area that are under supervision and under watch from there as well. So just to give you some of those key areas, so LAC is a looked after child. This is when a child has been placed in care by the local authority. That could be foster care, that could be residential home, it could be just they're placed into another setting. CP, child protection, is the specific activity undertaken with children identified as suffering or likely to suffer significant harm. And early help is support given at the initial stage of problems arising, but it's interesting that although it's early help within that particular situation being highlighted. So early help can happen at any age all the way through. So it's not that early help is with those children that are early in their learning, early years, key stage 1. early help can happen all the way through to secondary school as well. And then the ladder, which is the local authority designated officer who oversees allegations against staff as well. So this would now be the ideal reflection point on those key essential parts from there as well. So we move on to keeping children safe in education. So this is a key document in relation to safeguarding. It's been updated this year. We will focus on the updates, but as I said before, there is an expectation that governors read the whole document as all of it applies to their role. If you'd like more detailed breakdown or coverage of keeping children safe as a separate training offer, we are more than welcome to provide that as well. Okay, so keeping children safe in education. So as we mentioned earlier, peer-on-peer abuse is now referred to as child-on-child throughout. I think it's an important distinction to make, because peer, I think we naturally go to adults when we make that comparison with child-on-child. It makes it more direct as to what we're working with. Sexual violence and harassment have now been embedded through the document of keeping children safe in education, and the language that they've moved to is around victim and perpetrator. Harmful online challenges and online hoaxes is now mentioned as well within the documentation as well, which is again just an interesting development. So keeping children safe in education continued from there. So it focuses on the parts in brackets are just the sort of paragraph element that draw your attention to it. So if you're thinking that with this being new, I want to know more detail, hopefully this will just save you some of the time in terms of being able to, for you to be able to pinpoint those particular areas. So there needs to be a focus on regular reviews of monitoring, increased guidance on out of school hours as well, in terms of particularly picking up social media elements from there. There's more detail on low level concerns, and LGBT pupils and safe places for them in schools is a big move forward, and there's increased guidance on that. And online searches to be included in safer recruitment process, just looking into the background of people, and that does include elements in terms of social media output and things like that. I think within an education setting, it can seem quite extreme that that's the area we're going to, but I think it is important, and it's part of us understanding our duty as educationists as well. So they are the key updates, and so there's the guidance in terms of where you can go to pinpoint those particular developments too. So now moving on to your role as a governor and your role as a governing body as well. As we said, the Keeping Children Safe in Education, it's 164 pages, but the whole document is relevant to school governors. You are expected to have a working knowledge of all of those areas. Training should provide governors with the knowledge they need to provide sufficient challenge, assure themselves that policies and procedures are effective, and ensure there's a whole school approach to safeguarding in place. Those first two, if you don't feel that you currently have that understanding, please speak to us, and we will provide additional training in whichever areas there are. We've also got some templates and some sort of key questions that hopefully you'll be able to take with you as well. And in that, ensuring there is a whole school approach to safeguarding is in place. I think that is important. It is making sure that any visit that you do as a governor, there is a safeguarding element to it. There's a check on that, whether that's checking through documents, whether that is, if you're working with a subject lead, having one or two of those questions around safeguarding in place. And I know people aren't the be all and end all in terms of where everything goes to, but it is interesting that Ofsted within their inspections will ask different staff at different sort of positions within the school, and at different points in time as well on inspection around safeguarding questions. So it isn't as simple as a safeguarding half an hour. Actually, somebody can be coming in as an art lead, and they may well be asked some safeguarding questions in there. People can be stopped in corridors and just ask some of those key safeguarding questions as well. It's good practice for us to do that as governors. So sometimes wording of policies varies between schools, so please ask for these particular wordings. If other wordings are used, that is okay, but just please make sure that there is specific coverage of these particular areas within those reports. So for instance, if we're talking around particularly staff behaviour policy, quite often that is referred to as code of conduct, but make sure there are those specific elements that are outlined underneath as well. So governing bodies should ensure there is an effective child protection policy, there's a staff behaviour policy or code of conduct, and that should cover, and a growing sort of a need for it to cover, acceptable use of technology, staff and pupil relationships, communications, and again that includes social media and other applicable areas. And it should be that within the policy there is a forum where staff can contribute and share these policies. There should also be the opportunity for you as governors to be a part of the shaping and particularly the reviewing of those policies as well. So these are just key questions that you might want to ask yourself as a governing body, or if you're new to role, ask the governing body or ask the senior leadership team how those policies and procedures have been put into place. This is almost our intent for safeguarding, for use the language that we would use as sort of teachers and leaders in schools. So safeguarding child protection at the forefront and underpin all aspects and process of every other policy. Nothing else sort of overarches safeguarding. Everything else can be influenced by that, and I think it's important that we do place that as the umbrella that we mentioned at the start. All systems, process and policy should operate with the best interest of children at heart. That's our first and foremost duty, and therefore that has to take place. Systems should be in place, well promoted, easily understood and easily accessible for children to confidentially report abuse. Again, it is one where you may not ask the child what would happen if you had abuse, but a really good question to ask children is, where would you go or who would you go to if you had any difficulties or any worries? That particular wording, if you're doing any pupil voice work or you want to do wider safeguarding and pastoral work, is a really key area to pick up as well. And the approach is that concerns will be treated seriously, where they can expect their views and they can expect feedback given from there as well. So the whole school approach in terms of our check, as I sort of touched on before in the last part, it is asking where you can find these policies and documents. Sometimes that's so you asking for your own knowledge. Sometimes it's asking so that you're holding the school to account. Does the head teacher, does the DSL, does the deputy DSL, do other staff know where those policies are? And ask leaders to talk you through a process. They won't be able to give individual names, and they may or may not, depending on the case, be able to talk through specific cases, but they would be able to say, if a child makes this claim to this member of staff, it would go through this channel. And just hearing that process and then double checking that with another member of staff somewhere else actually is the consistency across. It's a really powerful tool for you as a governor. And it's interesting as well, and this is something you can do, you can ask formally, but also just do incidentally on walk-rounds. So what safeguarding procedures are visible? Do we have posters around school that say who the DSL is and who the deputy DSLs are? Are there reporting prompts? I know one of the things we've introduced at Mero are lanyards and passes. So my grey lanyard means that I'm an adult that works within the school and that I'm okay to talk to. We have a system where there's different colours, different things, and you'll see posters around school. And like I said before, ask children what they would do if they feel unsafe. It's just they're key ways for you to be able to check those messages. And then with the staff training, so that we ensure that staff undergo safeguarding training, and that does include the online safety elements as well. And safeguarding is integrated within a curriculum. It's not just something that happens once a term. Actually, our safeguarding opportunities woven throughout. Thinking particularly around e-safety elements within there, but there are lots of wider opportunities in the curriculum to talk through safeguarding. Teacher standards, expectations for managing behaviour effectively require teachers to have a clear understanding of the needs of all pupils. So that is, in terms of when you begin to talk about pay progression and performance management, those teacher standards are the key way to shaping that, or trainee teachers. That is placed within there for this reason. Further checks, so ask to see records of training, ask to see the materials, ask that question of how they're created and by who, ask about additional training, particularly within areas that are of greater concern or greater prevalence to your school or to your local area. And like I say, don't be afraid to ask teachers and support staff and other leaders. I would check this with the head teacher first, but ask 1 or 2 safeguarding questions at every visit. It's part of that sort of element of keeping that understanding and hoping that everybody is in unison with how these policies are going to be produced and sort of followed. This is a really useful guide that covers specific questions, what to look for, what good practices, what might be a flag for you, and where you can get additional support. It's specific to online safety. Like I say, so it is a good one in terms of if online safety is something that you are particularly concerned about or you have had issues with as an individual school. But again, in terms of the follow-up, in terms of you making sure that this is done and the accountability element, regularly ask questions about online safety and policy discussions. So if there is any mention of online platforms or interactions or anything like that, double check that that's coming back through in terms of policy. Ask to review online filter records. This is a really important one. because things are flagged on filters, that isn't to say that there is a big problem or thing, but it's just interesting to know what would and wouldn't be picked up. From experience within schools, sometimes this is topical. I know, for instance, our primaries and actually into our secondary, quite often we study the war. That will trigger quite a few different elements. Sometimes misspellings or part spellings where it picks up the start of a word can be one. I won't go into specifics of what they are. I will leave that to everybody's imagination. And ask children what online safety is and when they learn about it. But the key question to ask is when they last did it. And this will help you identify whether or not online safety is just the bolt-on that's covered in eSafety Week or National Awareness Week, or whether this is something that's woven through. These are on the bluesky website, but I will send these out as part of this training as well. There's just some key questions that you can ask of leaders and just ask on your visits as well. Hopefully this is a pickup that just helps you have something that can shape your thinking. Some will be applicable, some won't, but it just gives a nice starting point for those. And you can see it's broken down into areas as well that you may want to focus on. So now we'd move on to the reflection point for that particular part in terms of your role as governors. I've included this part as well. It's just an interesting video around the myths for safeguarding and governors. What your discretion in your time. So moving forward, please record that you've had this training. There is an obligation in terms of governors having training, but do consider if you need any additional training. We are constantly, particularly because we view the role of governors and the role of safeguarding as two sort of paramount areas, we will constantly try to put up bits like those question prompts either on our social media platform or on our website. I think we've got a governor training part that's also free materials. Check into those periodically, but if you do need any help or support with anything, please do speak out. It's something we've invested a lot of time and energy in and continue to, and we just want to share that. That's why this training is free. This is around sort of our role and the greater good of education. Thank you very much. If you need any information, please do contact us. Thank you.